Vicariously podcast. Stories and insights from unique entrepreneurs successfully pursuing their passion. Hello. Welcome to another edition of Vicariously podcast. Today's episode is actually one of my favorites. I believe I've said that before, but today's interview is sitting down with Taylor Simmers. Taylor Simmers is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Tahoe Expedition Academy. It is a small charter school up in near Incline Village. Taylor is a very interesting guy. He has been in the school systems all over the country, and he has been someone who has liked to teach sports, has liked to teach outdoor survival, has also taught traditional curriculums in 7th and 8th grade, all different levels, all different academics, etc. I'll let him give the better breakdown of that. But anyways, today's episode, the reason why it's so interesting is because not only does he look at it from a business perspective of how he started this school, but also goes in depth of just what he feels is wrong and needs help in the school system countrywide. So as a product of a family who has worked in the school system, i.e. my dad is a bus driver and my mom has been a teacher for well over 25 years, this is one of the ones that's very special to me because the things that Taylor is doing and everyone else at that school is very interesting. So I hope you enjoy it. As always, please follow us on our YouTube channel, and since you're probably already watching this, you will see where we sat down for this interview. You'll see some pictures of the school, and please obviously follow us on our Instagram account. Taylor Simmers with Tahoe Expedition Academy. All right, we are live. Here we go. This is go time. It's not actually live. I just like saying that. So today's guest is one of my dear friends, one of my favorites, Mr. Taylor Simmers. Crowd goes wild, as in the two dogs that he has sitting here in his office. How are you? Say hi. Introduce yourself.
I'm doing great. Yeah, my name's Taylor Simmers. I'm 44 years old. I'm an Aries through and through.
Good looking guy, too.
Born March 30th, 1972 in Bonn, Germany.
Really?
My father was in the CIA, though you can't tell anybody that, so we'll have to come after you.
Is that really true?
I will send Homeland Security after your ass. I was born in Bonn. My dad was working in the Cold War in Bonn, Germany in the 70s for the agency.
Wow.
He was an analyst for 30 plus years. So head of anti-terrorism in the Middle East. We had a green line in my house.
Really?
Which was a direct line to the agency.
No shit.
And just a little bit about me and my brother. He put the green line in my brother's bedroom.
Why?
Not in my bedroom, because he knew I would prank call the agency.
Genius.
Yeah, genius.
Damn, so how long were you in Germany?
Just 2 years.
Okay.
I know about 3 words. Verschwinden means get out of here. Alte Schnauze means be quiet or shut up. And Dummkopf means dummy.
I'm guessing you got
shut up, get out of here, you dummy.
You got those 3 quite often.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Mostly because you're a rambunctious guy.
A little bit. I'm active.
Very.
I'm pretty active for a 44-year-old white male, balding with fake teeth.
All of those are true.
It's funny because it's true.
Well, the reason that I have you sitting here today is because I've known you just from a friend level, and I never really dove into your business world. I know that in college you were incredibly intelligent and you got into some really cool stuff. I know what school you went to, so that already says that you're a lot smarter than me. But give us your background on what you studied in school and when you came out of it, what you wanted to do.
So I went to Princeton University undergrad. I studied English there. So English Lit was my major, BA in English. I learned how to read and write well. I learned how to communicate. Once I graduated from college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I went into a startup business called Warrior Lacrosse, and I was their first employee. Now they're a multi-million-dollar company. Note to self, should have stayed with them. Oh man, I would have had a house lakeside here in Lake Tahoe as opposed to the other side of the road. But I wasn't turned on by the business world. So I had been a coach and a teacher for a long time. A coach as a kid, and so I wanted to try out teaching, and I tried a teaching job, got a gig the next year, full time, working at a boarding school in Princeton, New Jersey. Taught there for 2 years and loved it. Fell in love, said this is my lifelong passion. So went on to teach for 2 years there, and then I traveled the world for a couple of years to really get educated. After that, I went back to teaching and back to education for another 3 or 4 years. Worked in a variety of different schools across the country, public, private, rural, urban, high school, middle school, you name it. And then went back to graduate school at Brown University, where I came across this guy and his work. His name was Ted Sizer. So he is one of the educational gurus of our time in terms of really being progressive about how we educate today's youth, and learned a lot from that 1 year MAT program at Brown. Learned as much there as I learned anywhere in school. It was just a magical, magical time. So really inspired to affect change in education. And I was already kind of doing that stuff in my own classroom, but really understood from a theoretical standpoint and a contextual standpoint how the educational landscape was moving and where it was moving. And that was around 2000 when the charter school movement just sort of really started taking hold across the country. And when I graduated from Brown and got my master's degree, I really knew that I wanted to somehow be an influencer in the educational space. And what that exactly was going to look like, I wasn't sure, but I had a pretty good idea of that. The status quo of education is not good enough for today's youth. And so that kind of brings me to where I am today.
So that's 2000-ish. When did you move out to the West Coast?
Moved out west. I lived in the West in 99, went back to graduate school on the East Coast, and moved back out in 2001, and then moved up to Tahoe in 2004. And I've been in Tahoe, Lake Tahoe, ever since.
So what brings you up to Lake Tahoe?
The ladies.
No,
there are no ladies here.
Your business venture. And I would say, so I've heard enough about the situation. I also saw everything unfold over the years. But I would say to give any of the listeners, probably the easiest way to look at this is, number one, to kind of go down the road of what you started, because I think we all know for the most part why, but share what you started, and then I think we'll backfill that with maybe some lessons and some, now I know this, and here's what I would do it differently for any of the entrepreneurs out there that are listening.
Well, let's underline and underscore the why. The why is the most important thing in your life. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? What motivates you? What is at the core of who you are, and why are you making those decisions? So I had a great job at a school, small private school in Incline Village. It was on cruise control. I checked out at 3:30 every day, go biking and hiking. Didn't really have to think about lesson plans, but that was status quo. That wasn't good enough for me. So I was working with a gentleman there named DC Larrabee, who he and I came together and worked together for at school for 7 years. And we come from different parts in education, but we had very, very similar ideas about how education should work and how education should look for today's crazy, changing, complex world. And so we decided to start our own school.
Very cool.
And we're in year 6 right now. We started with 72 kids. We have about 150 kids. We started with 4 full-time faculty. We have now 30 full-time faculty and staff. We started with a budget of about $500K. Now our budget's about $4 million. So still very small on the big picture of things, but we haven't even begun to really scratch the surface of what we want to do and why we're doing this, which is to design a school and an educational environment that is specifically targeted to meet today's world. So what does that mean? It means that the what of what we're doing is that we're ensuring that we're helping empower students to be creative problem solvers. If there's anything that we know about the world of today and tomorrow, is that we know nothing. We know that the change is fast and only increasing. We know change is now more unpredictable than ever with our new president and his political party and cohorts. And we know that the world continues to change at an incredibly fast pace, and we need to update the software of the educational space to meet today's needs. So our school is specifically designed to do that. And the way that we do that is really focusing on 3 core pillars: academics, character, and adventure. So our school treats those 3 pillars as equals. We're a school, absolutely start with academics. We deliver academic skills and content that kids need. As importantly, if not more importantly, we help them cultivate their character. We espouse character values like perseverance, collaboration, responsibility, creativity, empathy, advocacy, gratitude, and stewardship. So we have 8 character values that we practice school-wide. And then we create an environment that is a culture of risk takers and adventurers and explorers to really inspire kids to be engaged meaningfully in their learning process. So, before this entity, I worked at a variety of different schools, and this is what I did. I played school as a kid. I played school. I did what I had to do because I had to do it. I didn't really know why I was doing what I was doing other than I wanted to get to the next step. And I did really well, and I've seen thousands of kids over my years playing school really well, but there wasn't an authentic reason for them doing the work. There wasn't a true engagement in the learning process, in part because there wasn't real risk associated with their learning. And that's what we do. We embed what we call constructive adversity into our entire environment, educational environment. So constructive adversity is a term that I coined and trademarked, and it is the intentional use of calculated risk-taking to promote intellectual growth and personal development. So our school is a school of risk-takers. We value failure as much as we value success. And we know that learning happens when you're at your boundaries. And it's hard for the listeners to see this, but if you can think of 3 concentric circles, the innermost circle is your comfort zone. So, Luke, you and I watching football, eating a bag of potato chips on our couch, that's our comfort zone. The next concentric circle is, or from an educational standpoint, it's kids going to math class every day, same spot, same teacher, same kids, nothing changes. The next concentric circle is what we call the growth zone. That's where you want to push kids into, and you have to push them in there. They won't necessarily go in there on their own all the time. So there's intellectual growth zone, there's a social emotional growth zone, and there's a physical growth zone. So we very intentionally create and solve problems that require students to enter into the growth zone in order to create solutions. The third and outermost circle is called the freak out zone. Sometimes we get to the freak out zone, and in which case you retreat back to the growth zone and back to the comfort zone. So our school is centered around this idea of using risk and risk-taking and authentic risk-taking to engage students meaningfully in learning.
That is very cool and very, very well spoken. And I would say to give some more context to that, I have a couple questions after this, but just to add some context to that. So one of the reasons that I started this venture, I didn't want to just fly into Phoenix, Arizona, sit down with someone, do the podcast, leave. So it's part of the reason why I've gone the route that I've gone, that I want to come into these towns or these areas and meet with several entrepreneurs in that area and fully grasp what the town or what the area is about. San Diego, I think most people can figure that out. Lake Tahoe, specifically Incline Village, where we're at right now, it's a small town USA. It's definitely
small rural mountain town.
Very, yeah.
So, however, it's also a suburb of the Bay Area.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the innovation space in the world right now, of course, is Northern California.
And so by saying that, what I would say that means too is that a lot of their parents are either very well off, but don't have a ton of time to put towards their kids. Not to generalize, but sometimes you get that side of it, or you get the side where they're very hands-on and they treat their kids, at the age of 8 or 9, they're treating them just the same as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. They're taking them all over the place. They're giving them all these different encounters. They're traveling with them, etc. They probably have more liberties just because of money, I guess. But anyways, what I was getting at is that since I've been up here, the kids that I've been around are so much more advanced and so much more intelligent. Like the conversations that I'll have with these 10, 11, 12-year-olds is pretty ridiculous. So over the past couple of days, I've been on the chairlift, been skiing with friends, Eric specifically, who works at the school, and the kids will come up and they'll ride with us on the slopes, and they're 8, 9, 10 years old. And I'll have a conversation with this kid that's the same as I would have with one of my buddies. We're talking about, he was talking about how he's gone to see the String Cheese in concert and this and that. And he's telling me about all these new things coming out with GoPro and on and on and on. Point being, they have been taught this this kind of different way of life to your point. And I think it just all of a sudden now it just becomes natural the way they interact with whoever they encounter, not just kids their age, but adults or me at 36.
Yeah, I think that's the secret, right? It's one of the secrets is that the world is your classroom. So we bring our kids and our students to the world as the classroom, and we bring the world into the classroom. So when we do this work, when we call it field work, when we do field work and kids are spending up to 6 weeks a year in the field, we always meet with industry experts. So for studying immigration, these kids, they were like, what is this wall all about? Like, let's go solve this. Let's go identify this problem of innovation, of immigration, learn more about it, understand it, so we can help solve it. And so what they decided to do was to go to Mexico. So they drove from Tahoe to Mexico, kayaked the last 33 miles of the Colorado River to the Mexican border. This is a group of 15 eighth graders.
How old are you in 8th grade?
13, 13, 14.
All right.
And they met up with Border Patrol as their experts. They met up with some Chicano activists as their experts. They went to some local parks with murals about the story of the Chicanos and these immigrants who are coming across the border. And when I talked to one of the students after she got back, I said, "How's the trip?" She goes, "That was the hardest trip I've ever been on in my life. I'm totally spent, intellectually spent, physically spent, I don't want to talk to you right now." I was like, "I'll talk to you next week." Okay. So I talked to her the week after and I was like, "How's the trip?" She's like, "That was the hardest trip I've ever been on." I'm like, "All right. Can you tell me about immigration?" She started on a 15-minute diatribe about the complexity of the issue. And she had immersed herself fully in this issue and this problem and had real opinions about it. As a 14-year-old, she probably has better insight into that issue than the guy who's trying to build a wall to keep those people out. Because she actually went there, talked to people, looked at the issue from multiple angles, from historical angles, from a biological and genetic angles, from scientific angles, from geographical angles, from political, economic, all those different angles. She went to this place and got a firsthand understanding of that content. And yet the trip itself was completely and utterly challenging for her. And in every way possible. Intellectually challenging, social emotional challenging, and physically challenging. And we know that the brain science behind all of this, behind risk-taking, is pretty amazing. There's actually quite a bit of research that shows that risk-taking and risky play and challenges automatically, those experiences and memories automatically go to the hippocampus, which is where your long-term memories are stored. And they bypass the prefrontal cortex. So when kids are in their growth zone, when they're being challenged, when they're at the boundaries of and past the boundaries of their comfort level, the experiences automatically go to their long-term memory bank. That's just a biological development that we have so that if we're ever in that situation again, we know what to do. The brain automatically recalls it. When you're in your comfort zone, that information only goes to your short-term memory. And that's why kids don't remember what happened in math class last week, because they were sitting in their comfort zone. right? So in starting this venture, this adventure, and it has been a startup project. It's still a startup project, and we're still 6 years in. Maybe we're adolescent stage right now. The most important thing that we have done, and the thing that I keep looking back to say, this is why we're still in business, is that we have a big vision, and we're doing something differently. There's a book by Peter Thiel called 0 to 1. Have you heard of that book?
No.
0 to 1 means you go from nothing to something, as opposed to 1 to 1 plus n, where you're just making something already existing better, right? So we created this educational idea that it's an original and unique idea. In that respect, we went from 0 to 1 because schools themselves, academic institutions aren't using risk and challenge as a mode for their educational delivery system. Now, if we're talking about Knowles and Outward Bound and schools like that are focused on character development, they absolutely do. But schools themselves don't do that. In fact, schools are going the opposite direction, where it's all about safety, and it's all about security, and it's all about success and positive reinforcement and encouragement. All that's great and important. But that's not where the learning happens. Yeah. And so, to those listeners out there, however many there are of you, like 2 or 3, soon to be many, 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 you go big, and you have a big vision and a big dream, and you need to be unique, and you need to be different. And people need to be able to say why you're unique and different. And this is something that we have done very poorly over the course of the last 5 or 6 years.
You mean from a marketing standpoint?
Positioning, marketing, branding. I used to think that stuff was irrelevant. If I ever go into a new venture again, that will be the first thing that I do. The first thing that we did for this adventure was create an awesome product. The product speaks for itself, but we didn't package that product and position it in a way that allowed us to communicate it really effectively. It's taken years of distillation, ongoing branding exercises to really capture and synthesize what we do and communicate it effectively. The next venture I will start with the positioning. I will start with the messaging. I will start with the marketing and the branding, because that communication tool is absolutely essential. And you have to include that in your budgeting, in your planning, in the initial stages.
So you mean more from a business standpoint, though, because the actual product, like you said, it speaks for itself, and the case studies that you have through X number of years speaks for itself. So from a business perspective, you would have positioned it better to set yourself up long term and to grow faster. To grow faster,
to get funding, to communicate more effectively. This is a business, right? It's a school. We're a nonprofit organization, 501c3, but we're a private school. So we're tuition-based. We have customers who pay money for our product. And through experience, our customers can describe what we do. But only until recently have we been able to really position ourselves within the educational landscape that tells people how we're different, and as importantly, why we're different.
So devil's advocate, you have built this, your enrollment has more than doubled in the past couple of years. So can you take this model and replicate it anywhere in the country? Or do you think that this is very, very unique because of the setting and atmosphere that you have here in Tahoe / the Bay Area, and then also the people that you have behind it supporting it?
That's a good question. Absolutely. The impetus behind the school is to have ripple effects beyond the shores of Lake Tahoe. So this venture will only be successful if we can move the educational needle forward across the country and potentially across the world. So in terms of being able to scale what we're doing, absolutely. We can scale the idea. You can scale an idea. You can train people for ideas. There's costs associated to what we do, and there's no secret that we need to spend more money on education. There's no secret. There's no secret that teachers need to be paid more. There's no secret that our students need more, per capita dollars funding each year. And I would argue that that additional funding should go directly to creating real experiences for kids. So think about this, and think about the future workforce. And this is where our funding is coming from. Our funding is coming from entrepreneurs who want their employees to have a backbone, to be able to solve problems collaboratively and creatively. And do you know that creativity, and don't quote me here, but creativity is the act of creating something new from new information. It's going from 0 to 1. Creativity is not going from 1 to 1 plus n. And so our funders and those people who are supporting this venture are also entrepreneurs, and they are completely dissatisfied with today's workforce because their employees, they can solve problems that have been solved before using existing tools. But when they get to a problem that truly requires creativity and coming up with new solutions and new tools for new problems, they crumble. And when they get yelled at, they crumble.
They're not used to that.
They're not used to that. They haven't been trained.
They've been coddled.
They haven't been educated in the way of real life. And so when you think about the workforce of tomorrow, we need to start preparing those kids when they're freaking 3 years old. So they can identify real world problems, and they can go about solving them. And they have the academic, intellectual understanding of how to do it. They have the character to be able to show perseverance and collaborate and take responsibility and show resilience and have this creativity and all this stuff. And they need to have the chutzpah and the cojones and the cowboys to like sack up and go do it. They need to have this thirst for adventure. And so that's who's funding this venture, is people who know that tomorrow's and today's workforce is not going to satisfy our need to solve these problems.
Yeah. So I have another question, and we'll switch gears, but so my one question is, I definitely want to get into more of the mechanics of how someone, if someone's out there and they say, you know what, this is awesome, I want to get in touch with you, I want to replicate this, where do I start, how much funding do I need, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to go down that path, but before that, can you share a couple of the unique, I guess, adventures that you currently have at the school?
Well, I just talked about one with the immigration.
Yeah.
Right. I'll talk about the PreK kids, 3 and 4 year olds. So their question and their problem is how do we treat our pets, right? How do I treat my pet well? That's the question. And in order to solve this question, answer this question, and come up with their own solutions to it, their own answers to it, they're doing a number of different experiences. They're having a number of different experiences, right? In order to get to know pets in a variety of different circumstances, a variety of different ways in society. So they're going to animal hospitals and shelters. They're meeting with vets. They are going dog sledding, 3 and 4 year olds. They're going to work with avalanche dogs at the ski resorts. They're adopting pets, right? So they have any number of different interactions with animals and pets in order to frame their own opinion based on their own experiences. Another example is our seniors. So we have our first graduating class of seniors this year.
Cool.
6 seniors. And they're getting into the schools of their choice, their colleges and university of their choice, which is great. And they're getting merit-based scholarships to go there because they've had these experiences. They can show these universities and colleges what they're able to do and what they can create, not just that they can take a test and get good grades.
Completely separates them from everyone else.
Absolutely. And so the seniors identified the Syrian refugee crisis as something that they wanted to explore and understand more about and help solve. And they did that last spring. Pretty relevant and timely issue, right? And so they developed a curriculum, and they have been conducting this curriculum over the course of this semester, where they're, again, looking at the history of refugees, geography, political reasons, economic reasons for it. They're looking at international relations and policies. They're looking at human activists and social activism. They're looking at this issue from a number of different intellectual angles. And then they decided to go to Greece for 2 weeks and work in some refugee camps.
Wow.
And their goal is to create and write a book that highlights the people that they met in these camps, to give a face to these nameless thousands and thousands of refugees who are numbers. And so they're helping solve this problem by personalizing and personifying the stories of the people that they met in order to educate people that these are happy people. They're kind, they're generous, they're human beings, just like you and me. And they deserve the respect and dignity and honor that every single one of us deserves. So that to me was pretty mind-blowing that these 6 seniors were able to identify a real-world problem, understand it, engage with it from multiple perspectives, and come up with something that might actually inform other people and educate other people about what the truth of the situation is.
I agree, and I think it gets back to the point of the comfort zone, because I'm sure there's plenty of people listening, hopefully more than 2 or 3, but plenty of people listening to this podcast that would say, holy shit, why even tackle that? That would have never crossed my plate as a middle school senior or high school senior. That's just not, it's not where my head or my mental capacity was at. I never fathomed that I could make a difference or that I could tackle such a problem. So that speaks volumes.
The reason for that is the experiences that they had that led up to that.
Yeah.
So they've been on 23 trips in 3.5 years, totaling over 130 days and nights offsite in the field. And they've become global citizens. So they have a global awareness and global understanding that is completely unique for a high school senior. If we're lucky enough in our adult life, we get to travel the world and see the world and understand multiple cultures and diverse peoples and things from multiple perspectives. These kids are 17 and 18 years old, and they have a grasp of the complexity, the importance, and I think the need for them to do good for themselves and to do good for others.
So do you think that the reason that the school system is so, I guess, coddling to the younger students is because we don't think that they can comprehend such things, or we don't want them to be out on their own or to have their own thoughts? It's more of, let me just structure this and tell you how you need to act, and let me just I hate to keep using the word coddle, but it really is what it feels like. Like, it's
pretty simple. Today's educational landscape and models were designed 50 years ago. They were designed for a different time. They were designed for a factory model information age where there were a few keepers of knowledge, and the teachers were the keepers of the knowledge, and they would disseminate this knowledge to their students. So I think that's a big part of it, is that the educational models of today, and there's definitely some exceptions out there, but the majority of the models today were designed 50 years ago or 100 years ago, right, with these factory models. So there has not been an updating of the software of our educational space, for one. For two, absolutely, with affluence and connectivity and tools and resources, right, we have become more connected than ever. And so parents have clamped down entirely on what they want their kids to do. You can call them helicopter parents. You can call a number of different things, but there has been a complete trend towards what I like to call as a distillation of rugged individualism, right? There's no value, there's not as much value in our culture today on rugged individualism as there was 150 years ago. And rugged individualism is actually what founded our country, right? We were a culture and a group of rugged individualists who said, you know what, mother country, I'm going to go here and start this, and you don't have anything to say about it. And if you do, I will fight back. That is the culture that we need to reinvigorate in today's world, that kids can actually do things that are amazing, and that we instill these values of rugged individualism, of resilience, of perseverance, of creativity, collaboration we help our students develop those things over time. And we do that in their formative years when their brain is developing. We don't wait till after they are 25 or 18 for them to start learning from the real world. We need to do that sooner and faster and better when they're actually going through the brain development process. I call it the writing of their operating system, right? As their brain develops, their prefrontal cortex develops, their executive functioning, prioritization, time management, decision making, all that stuff, they are writing the operating system of their brain. And we know that the prefrontal cortex stopped developing around the age of 25. So after that, it's very, very challenging to rewrite a new way of how to go about working with people, or how to go about solving problems, or how to go about doing things. It's really challenging for us old folks to like change our ways. And that's because our brain has stopped developing. So we want to, when they're young, we want to test and iterate them and help them iterate. We want to push them to failure so that they can figure out where their operating system is not functioning properly. That's the critical path.
So it's almost like we're a little bit backwards in the sense that everyone sits back and complains about how expensive college has come to be, yet it's almost more rewarding to invest that kind of money in the earlier years of schooling instead of waiting all the way until college.
I've been saying that for a long time. I don't know. Have you been listening to my podcast?
I
have like 3 listeners, so I don't know if you've been one of those listeners. But I've been saying that for a long time, that colleges are now just getting around to changing their ways, but absolutely an investment in early childhood education, adolescent education is absolutely imperative for someone to help ensure that their child has the skills, the character, the intellect, the ability, the empathy to handle today's very, very complex, fast-paced world.
So there's a lot of people that are all on board right now, and then all of a sudden we tell them, sticker shock, here's how much school costs, and here's the downfall of there's only a handful of these schools all over the country, and they live in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing around them. So to kind of go back on the business side of it, how does one seek out one of these schools, number one? And number two, in your experience, how can one start such a school, such a program?
Well, it's important to note that we're part of a couple networks, and those networks actually can reach about 100,000 kids right now. So we're part of the EL Education Network with about 40,000 kids in 175 schools. So content that we create, we can push across that network. So we actually can reach a number of schools. And this is an incredible network of schools that really values character and values project-based learning. It was started by Outward Bound and the Harvard Graduate School of Education 20 years ago. So there are EL schools all over the country. It's called EL Education, and used to stand for Expeditionary Learning, but they had to change the name. So it's EL Education. So you can find one of these schools across the country, in any major city across the country. And then for high school, we're part of what we call is Summit Basecamp. And this is a platform. It's the most innovative personalized learning platform, PLP. And this is being funded and driven by Mark Zuckerberg and Alicia Chan of Facebook. And his 20 Facebook engineers are helping develop this software platform. So again, this is free, open source networking where we can share content across our 100 member schools and touching thousands and thousands of kids. And so that's one way that people will ultimately have access to this kind of approach, because we are creating content and pushing it across these platforms and across these channels. And I would say more generally, there's a real educational revolution happening right now, a resurgence of very hands-on, project-based, we call it problem-based, but project-based learning that allows for students to get dirty and to get their hands dirty and to learn by doing, just like we have for thousands and thousands of years. And there's also a push towards character education being as valuable and as important as academic and intellectual growth. That personal development, we know, is actually the most single important determining factor in one's success in life is your character. So there are definitely some movements happening. So we're a part of a larger, we might be a small school in the mountains, but we're pushing content for one. We're part of larger networks for two. So there are definitely schools out there that are doing this kind of work. But we view our school as kind of a laboratory where we're experimenting. And how much risk can you take, and how do you mitigate that risk, and what are the benefits, and what does it do to kids, and all that stuff. And to your second point of, the financials and what is it, how do you get going on this? It costs money to start any startup, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would say included in your budget, in addition to the marketing piece and the vision and the branding, right? You need to make sure that you have more than one donor who is helping fund your project, right? So we call it the Mack truck approach, right? If the Mack truck hits your donor, you're toast. Shit. That's like what you don't do, right? And that's another thing that we've learned is we haven't diversified our donor base to the level that we need it to.
How many did you start with?
Really, we've had 2 major benefactors over the course of our 5 or 6 years, and that's not enough, right? So you need to diversify your donor base early on and get people backing you from multiple angles to make sure that the whims and wishes of one donor do not influence your day-to-day or your next plan. And we've made that mistake, right? We said, we'll start a high school if we have a truckload of money falls from the sky. Sure enough, a truckload of money fell from the sky, and we started a high school. But that there's been strings attached, and it's been a challenge because we have one truck full of money, not multiple trucks bringing in a little bit of money. We have one big truck, one driver, and that's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, you start with a vision, you put a team together, you create an execution plan and a very clear business model, time frame, execution plan. And the jury's out on, what does a modern day business plan look like, right? But we know you need a couple things. We know you need a very clear vision of what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and why it's positioned to be unique and different and effective and successful. Start with that. You need a very clear messaging, marketing, communication plan to get that information out. You need to put a team together of people who are willing to put all the chips in all the time and build a culture of calculated risk takers who buy into that vision with you. Because you're going to hit major bumps. You're going to have major successes and major setbacks. And you need committed people, ideally who have not only the academic qualifications or the business qualifications or the expertise, but who have done a startup before. This is my first real startup venture.
Yeah.
And I can tell you there's so many things that I would do differently next time. And then the third piece that you need, right, in addition to your vision and your team, you need a clear business plan, right? A clear financial forecasting model with what we call it the ceiling and the floor. Right, here's the ceiling, here's how high we can go, and here's the floor. Here's where we know where we're going to have major pain points. And what you need to do is forecast those pain points out over time. So if we hit these metrics, then we'll be here. This is midway up the wall. But if we don't hit these metrics, we're going to be at the floor at this point. So we're going to need an influx of cash. So you're going to have those, invariably, you're going to have those times where you're going to be out of money or close to it. And you're going to be flush and looking good. And so what you need to do is forecast those pain points as much as possible so that you can prepare for that and you can prepare your team for that, and then you can actively execute on what's going on. The last thing I would leave you with and leave your listeners with, I think there are probably more than a few now. But the last thing I would leave your listeners with is, what I like to call is keep your little eye on the vision, right? Little eye on the vision, little eye on long term, little eye on where you're going, and make sure your team knows where you're going. And then your big eye on a day-to-day execution, and not worry about next week or the week after or the week after. You worry about 6 months from now. You worry about 12 months from now. You worry about 18 months from now. And you need to worry about the critical path. What is going to absolutely determine your success or failure 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now? Keep your little eye on those things and keep your big eye on the day-to-day to make sure you're getting to those places. And soon enough, you're going to be 6 months in and you say, whoa, we navigated that. Then you're going to the next 6 months, right? From what I understand, a lot of startups do 6-week cycles, right? So create a cycle where it's a feedback loop, a feedback cycle where you're You work for 6 weeks, you pause, you look around, you see where you are. Head down for another 6 weeks, reflect, do it again. And sure enough, like after 3 or 4 or 5 of those, you'll be in 6 months. You'll be in a year. All of a sudden, then you want to gauge to where you are as opposed to your like 36-month forecast, right? So I'll kind of recount those things, right? Vision, go big, go huge, dream huge, right? It's cliche, but it's freaking true.
Yeah.
Do something different, unique, original, exciting, something that's motivating to you and to others. Get a freaking awesome team together, people that you can go to war with, people that you want to stand back to back to in the field of battle, people that you will not cower at the face of adversity, right? Because the shit is going to hit the fan. Just a matter of when and how bad and how well you're prepared. And then like get the financial pain points, right? Know what your financial model looks like and know when you're going to have your bank account flush and know when it's going to be tight and plan for those things accordingly. And then sort of maintain that day-to-day, like positivity, man. Like you can be positive on a day-to-day basis. It's really difficult to be positive if you're worrying about 4 weeks from now. Are you worried about 2 weeks from now? Are you worried about 6 months from now? It's really challenging to be positive because you don't know what's going to happen, right? It's really easy to be positive and to have a growth mindset on a day-to-day basis. So I get up every day and I'm like, because I don't know if this thing's going to work, Luke. Honestly, like it's on the precipice right now, continues to be on the freaking precipice. This thing could freaking collapse. And the reason being is we're still Mack trucking. We still have a Mack truck approach. We haven't diversified our funding yet. And it's scary, man. It's like this baby that I spent the last 6 years of my life, sweat, equity, blood and tears, freaking working on, along with 30 other people, the thing could collapse tomorrow because we haven't done a couple things really well. We haven't gotten the big vision to get the funders message really, really effectively. We're kind of there now, but we didn't have that in our back pocket to say, how am I going to go raise money? Here's my vision deck. Here's my messaging. Here's my positioning. Oh, right. And here's my team. That's how you raise money. Vision, team. Really simple. We haven't done that. So we still have this Mack truck approach still happening. And there's a freaking semi truck coming down the highway and it may hit the truckload of cash that landed and explode the whole freaking thing, dude. I'm serious.
These roads are icy up here.
They're freaking icy and snowy and can't see around corners.
Got 25 feet of snow.
Yeah. So
shipment might not get delivered.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And then, lastly, and this is only from what I hear from other, entrepreneurs, and I'm kind of my friends call me a reluctant entrepreneur, right? That I wanted to change things and do some change, but I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. And that's still kind of the case. I certainly know more now than I did 6 years ago. But the last piece of advice or the last insight I would have is, I totally blanked. I don't know what was I going to say, Luke? I totally blanked on that, dude. Can you cut that out?
I will. I'll cut that out. I'll chime in here because I think sitting in my seat, obviously we haven't had someone on here before that has started a school or has gone down this path. And that's kind of the point of this whole podcast. But some of the underlying themes that you've mentioned have been spot on with other people. And I think that some people take a very calculated approach, but then they get let down because it didn't come to fruition. Other people fly by the seat of their pants and they're not really let down because they didn't have those expectations going in. So although you had expectations and you had a game plan and you've learned from your mistakes, et cetera, where you sit now, you're still netting a really, really amazing venture. So if this one does end up making it for another 6, 12, 18 years, that's awesome. If it doesn't, you at least have the background, you found the people, you have a proven case study, you have all these parents that you've influenced their kids, and you have this amazing backing that you've built to worst case scenario replicate in another fashion.
Yeah, I can't wait to start my next venture. I'll do it much better the second time around. And I think what I was going to say is, for the maturation process of a startup, from 0 to 7 years, you're a startup. kind of age, 7 years or so, 5 to 7 years. And this is probably quicker for the tech space than it is for humanitarian space, right? Where you're working with people and emotions as opposed to software and HTML code. But what I've seen as a maturation is that you hit plateaus and you got to celebrate the crap out of those plateaus. Right. And so the year 5 plateau was huge for us. Like, we're at year 5. We doubled our enrollment. We are crushing it right now. Our kids are doing amazing things. Our teachers are completely inspired. Our parents are inspired. We have some major funding to develop a new campus, a 42-acre campus in the Martis Valley. So, we're on the brink of something pretty big. And so we hit this plateau. We increased our board to really diversify our board of trustees with some parents, non-parent board members who are experts in fields of business and venture capital and accounting and management consulting. And that was a major plateau for us, right? When you can diversify your board and your supporting cast,
absolutely,
that's a huge plateau. But the maturation of a startup, right, is like 0 to 5, 0 to 7. You're a freaking startup, man. It is scrape every single day. Every single day it's a scrape and it's a struggle and it's a grind and it's a climb and you're working your butt off. And, I can see in a year or 2, we could kind of mature into the next phase of a startup. Right, so you have your A round, your B round, your C round, your D round. Right, your A round is proof of concept. Your B round is spend a ton of money to get to the C round where you're going to make a bunch of money, right? And we're kind of still in this B round where we're spending a bunch of money to get to the C round where you're going to get people to really blow you up. And that, to get to D, it takes 10 years, man. Right, and so this is why I'm like, keep the little eye on the 10-year vision, but don't get too caught up in that.
Mm-hmm.
Get caught up in the day-to-day. Make sure you're doing something amazing every day and you're inching the ball forward every single day. And I think that's the key. So have some perspective on how long this crap takes, right? It's like a 10-year project.
Is that what keeps you excited every day?
I love being a creative problem solver. I love it. I love solving problems that are real problems that I don't know the answers to. And I'm using new tools to solve those problems. I'm creating new tools to solve those problems. That's what our kids are doing. That's what we're doing as a school. We're creating and designing programs and educational environments and content to help kids become ready for today's crazy, complex world. And in the process, on the business side, we're trying to break the mold and break the model for what schools look like and how they're funded and what they can do and what kind of impact they can have. Ultimately, we want to be a private school with a public purpose. We want to break down the gilded gates and we are not a school up on a private school up on a hill. We spend, we took 269 trips last year school-wide, and service is embedded into every one of those trips, right?
Wow.
So we are a private school doing good for ourselves and doing good for others. And this is where a private school with a public purpose comes in. There's a guy named Al Adams who started, or was a head of school of Lick Wilmerding School down in San Francisco, who came up with this terminology, his phrase, being a private school with a public purpose. And that means using our affluence, resources, privilege, opportunity, right? This is an opportunity for us to really do good for ourselves and make ourselves feel good and to do good for others. And that, I think that's what keeps me driven is I call it the Robin Hood model a little bit, right? I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? We're taking these tuition dollars from these affluent people in order to use their kids as guinea pigs to create content in order to push to other people who are going to benefit from it. We also have access for kids from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds, but really it's a Robin Hood model of, okay, how do we take this cadre of affluence and people who have privilege, and how do we use that as an opportunity to affect change for the common good? Because education it's a common goal for the common good. And so we're really trying to capitalize on this opportunity. And the more that you think about, and that's part of the vision for us, right? The vision is to do good for others and to do good for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so the more that you get people on board with that vision of this product that we're creating, it's going to do good for us in our bottom line, and it's going to do good for the community and for the world, and it's going to move the needle forward in whatever industry you're in. take Tesla or take Google or take Patagonia or take, any number of these companies, all of whom we've worked with over the last, 5 years. And you look at them as models, like they have huge visions. And it's not about their vision is not about the financial model, right? The vision is about how do we take this opportunity that we have before us to positively impact our own lives and the lives of others and the environment in which we live.
That is very, very well said. And I can hear the passion in your voice. I think that when you got into this, it was something that you told me you 15 years ago, you had it circled. It was something you knew you wanted to do as soon as you came out of college. I think it's pretty remarkable. You have a gorgeous setting. I've told you I've met some of the kids. I've seen the program. I've been over to the school. It is very, very impressive. And thank you very much for sitting on the Vicariously podcast. And we'll definitely circle back with you because I'm going to need to come back up here in golf season and then again in ski season. And so I will be back up and we'll follow up with you.
Yeah, maybe we'll be here, Luke. Maybe we won't.
I think you will. I got a lot of confidence in you, brother.
Hey, thanks, man.
Vicariously podcast, Taylor Simmers. Out.